Hello, today we're going to be talking about the federal bureaucracy. We're going to be examining what sometimes is called the fourth branch of government. All right, the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy literally means ruled by desks, okay? And you can kind of take this as government by clerks. All right, so when we talk about the bureaucracy, we're talking about red tape. We're talking about the actual hands and fingers of the executive branch in implementation of policy. All right, here's a pretty straightforward definition for you. An administrative system, especially in government, dividing work into specific categories, that's going to be carried out by special departments by non-elected officials. And that's kind of a key component here to the bureaucracy in the fourth branch. All right, here are the characteristics of bureaucracy. These are kind of the keys here to understanding how bureaucracy works, and you can see the triangle there above my head there on the screen. Administration of government through departments, again, a division of labor, and again, most of the time we're talking about a hierarchy of labor. It's going to consist of unelected, but often very highly trained professionals that have a very specific skill set that makes them essential into making and executing policy. There's a great deal of task specialization. Everyone has a job. There's not a lot of generalist jobs. When we talk about the federal bureaucracy, we have a lot of very specific skills. And again, back to that hierarchical authority. Max Weber was very famous for talking about that triangular structure where, you know, the point of the pyramid is the top, where the absolute decision makers, and it's going to work its way down to the base of the pyramid, where are the actual workers. All right, here are some of the public perceptions of bureaucracies. These are the things that you've probably heard, maybe your parents mentioned in the past. You can see the guy there cutting through the red tape. The public perception of bureaucracy is the fact that they're impersonal, that they follow very rigid and complex procedures without much wiggle room or room for creativity, and the fact that it is very hierarchical can sometimes stifle how effective and how innovative these agencies can be in solving problems. And again, red tape continuously is something that is a lot bandied about when we talk about bureaucracy. All right, so let's talk about what is the federal bureaucracy, and we have a bunch of the different cabinet departments and agencies listed there for you. The federal bureaucracy is more than 4 million employees. Almost 3 million are civilians or civil servants. President only appoints about 3% of the positions in the federal bureaucracy. So the majority of those are going to be filled with patronage. 15 different cabinet level departments, 200 plus independent agencies, and there are 2,000 different bureaus, divisions, and branches within those agencies. So you can see it's a huge structure. The biggest part of the federal bureaucracy, of course, is going to be the Department of Defense, followed by the Postal Service, and then finally the Veterans Administration. Those are the three biggest pieces of the federal bureaucracy in terms of employees. What does the federal bureaucracy do? The federal bureaucracy implements, it carries out the laws of Congress and the executive orders of the president. It administers, it carries out regular administrative work, provides services. For example, there you'll see the Social Security Administration is responsible for making sure those on Social Security receiving those benefits get their checks. And then finally, they provide regulation. They issue rules and regulations that are going to impact the public. And the example there is the Environmental Protection Agency set clean air standards and the impact of that across society. So three main functions. They're going to implement, they're going to administer, and they're going to regulate. How is the federal bureaucracy organized? All right, it's going to consist of a couple different components here. We have cabinet departments, which we've talked a little bit about before. We have independent executive agencies, we have independent regulatory commissions, and we have government corporations. So we have basic 4 different parts that we're going to talk about. All right, so this is how the federal bureaucracy breaks down in big picture. Again, you'll notice there, president are the red lines in terms of connections to those different areas, and Congress or you're going to see the green lines connected with Congress. So the federal bureaucracy does have the work of both or these two branches of government. Again, you'll notice the president is connected to all of the different areas of the federal bureaucracy because ultimately the executive branch and the president are responsible for execution of the law. But Congress does have power and oversight over those areas, the cabinet departments, independent executive agencies, and independent regulatory commissions, also government corporations. So the president and Congress are going to work in concert with one another in order to execute and create good policy. Here's another snapshot. This is actually something that's in your textbook. The organization of the federal bureaucracy. You'll notice the hierarchical structure there. At the very top is the president, and then you have your cabinet departments, and then you have your other independent agencies, your independent regulatory commissions, and again, focusing on that hierarchical structure from top down. All right, so let's start with cabinet departments. 15 cabinet departments. They're headed by a secretary, appointed by the president, approved by the Senate. Again, the only difference there is the Attorney General, who is the head of the Department of Justice. Each department is an expert in specific policy area. So the Department of Interior is an expert on all the areas covered by Interior, mining, natural resources, the National Park System, etc. Each department has its own budget. We talked a little bit about that in the budget section. Each different department is going to give a specific amount of money to accomplish its mission. And the Department of Homeland Security is the most recent cabinet department to be added. All right, here's an example of the breakdown of the framework of how a cabinet department is organized. Okay, you'll notice there it focuses there on the secretary and the deputy secretary. And this is kind of a good snapshot of how all of the different cabinet agencies or cabinet departments are designed. All right, so you'll notice a series of different secretaries, a series of different directors. You have general counsel, and then you have undersecretaries and all of the different subtopics that are handled by Homeland Security. And you can take a quick peek at this. All right, so let's talk about independent executive agencies. These are established by Congress with separate status that exists outside of the executive branch. Okay, so these are created by Congress, and they are insulated from the executive branch. They are given a specific mandate, which is a specific job, and they're going to perform a very specific service function. They're not regulatory agencies, okay? They're not Overwatch, they're not creating rules. They have a very specific service function. Some examples would be the Social Security Administration, the CIA, NASA, and the EPA. Great examples of independent executive agencies. All right, an independent regulatory commission. These independent regulatory commissions regulate a very specific economic activity or an interest. Okay, one great example here of an independent regulatory commission is going to be the FCC, all right, the Federal Communications Commission. They control public airwaves, frequencies. We've talked about them in the past. Another example would be the Federal Reserve Board. They're responsible for our banking system and on control of our money supply. So they're going to have a very specific economic activity or interest, all right, independent regulatory commission. IRCs are going to operate independently from Congress and the President. They stand absolutely by themselves. Again, they're supposed to be removed from politics because they're going to be operating or creating a very specific economic service. Once these leaders are appointed and seated, their members cannot be removed without cause. All right, the President just can't decide to remove the head of the FCC or the FRB. That leader is going to have to break the law in order to be removed from their position. All right, government corporations. These are government-owned businesses created by Congress. Best example here is going to be the U.S. Postal Service. Amtrak is another. The Tennessee Valley Authority, going all the way back to the New Deal, is a great example. They are government-owned businesses created by Congress. They, a lot of the time, are not going to make money, but they are going to serve a very specific need. They're going to be operated like private businesses, but they're going to be owned by the federal government. And I think all of you are aware of the issues with the U.S. Postal Service. All right, who works in these different types of agency and departments? Okay, they're called bureaucrats. 97% of them working in this system are career government employees, which means they're going to go and they're going to spend 20 to 30 years working in this position. Only about 10% of bureaucrats actually live in the D.C. area. That's a big misconception out there that they're all here in D.C. 30% of the bureaucracy exists inside the Department of Defense because of, again, the sheer size of our armed forces. Less than 15% actually work for social agencies, which is pretty interesting when you see the bulk of the money actually is being directed towards these social agencies today. Most are white-collar workers, which mean they're office jobs, secretaries, clerks, lawyers, engineers. And again, when you take a look at the bureaucracy, it is much more diverse than if we look at the members of Congress. You know, in terms of racial and sex diversity, there are more women, there are more minorities working in the federal bureaucracy than you'll find in Congress, and it makes sense. It's a much larger body. All right, where do federal employees work here? Here's a quick breakdown. Data's a little bit older here, but it'll give you an idea of how the different cabinet departments are broken down and some of the other different agencies there at the bottom. Okay, what kind of jobs do bureaucrats do? Bureaucrats are going to do all kinds of jobs. You'll notice there the majority of them are general, administrative, or clerical office services. A lot of those employees, a little less than 400,000 of them. You have those involved in medicine, a lot of engineers and accountants. We have investigators. Anything you can think of in the federal bureaucracy, you're going to find them working in their jobs. Okay, and here are some of the general characteristics and distribution of federal employees. This is, again, a little older, but it's going to give you a good snapshot of how gender is divided and race in the federal bureaucracy. You can still see that we fall short in a lot of areas. All right, who supervises the federal bureaucracy? All right, the president supervises the federal bureaucracy. The president can appoint and remove agency heads. He can reorganize cabinet departments and agencies. He can issue executive orders to influence the movement or direction of those agencies. He also can reduce an agency's budget in his budget proposal. Congress oversees the bureaucracy. Congress can create and abolish agencies and departments totally. They can cut and reduce funding due to the power of the purse. They can investigate agencies and their activities. They can bring people forward. For example, there in the picture you see the former FEMA chief, Michael Brown, who was in charge during Katrina. They can have committee hearings. So one of the biggest issues of congressional oversight, investigations, hearings. They can cut budgets. They can pass new legislation that alters agency function. And they also can drag their feet and fail to confirm presidential appointments. And we've noticed there in the Senate that there's been some great changes recently. All right. Federal courts also check the bureaucracy. Federal courts can, through judicial review, rule on whether the bureaucracy is acted within the law and the U.S. Constitution. They can deem their acts constitutional or not. And they also can provide due process for individuals who are affected by bureaucratic action. So if they feel like they've been wronged by the bureaucracy, there is an avenue to contest that or to challenge it through the courts. Okay, thank you. That's a quick snapshot of how the federal bureaucracy works, what it is, and what it does. Thank you for watching.